You know that common advice we always hear? Go the extra mile at work. It sounds great, right? But what if the very system set up to reward all that extra effort is, well, secretly biased? Today, we're digging into something called the extra mile paradox and how it can accidentally end up penalizing the very people it's supposed to help. It really all comes down to this simple question. When you volunteer for that extra project, or you're the one organizing the office party, is your hard work valued the same way as everyone else's? As we're about to find out, the answer is often a resounding and pretty surprising no. So let's dive right into what a fascinating academic study has dubbed the extra mile paradox. I mean, on the surface, it makes perfect sense. Of course, companies want to encourage people who give it their all. So, one financial services firm decided to create a formal system to do just that, to actually track and give bonuses to employees for all those contributions that were above and beyond. But this is where things started to get really interesting. So, there's a technical term for this going the extra mile stuff. It's called organizational citizenship behavior, or OCB for short. Just think of it as all the voluntary things you do that aren't technically in your job description, but they help the whole organization run smoother. You know, from helping out a coworker to taking on a brand new initiative. And everything we're talking about today comes from a really rigorous study by four professors: Jasmine Bohl, Hila Fogel-Yari, Isabella Grabner, and Karen Sedotoli. It was published in the Accounting Review. And what makes it so powerful is that they got incredible access to the internal data from that financial services firm to see what really happens when you try to formalize rewards for this kind of behavior. Okay, so here's the absolute key to what they found. It turns out not all extra mile work is viewed the same way. The researchers saw that these voluntary tasks fell into two very distinct categories. On one side, you've got what they call agentic tasks. Think of these as the big, strategic, goal-oriented projects. They're often seen as stereotypically masculine. And on the other side, you have communal tasks. This is the supportive, collaborative work, the culture-building stuff, which is often seen as stereotypically feminine. And here are some perfect examples to make it really clear. An agentic task, that's something like leading a huge, high-stakes project to redesign a core process. A communal one, that's more like organizing morale-boosting events for the team. Both are valuable, for sure, but as we're about to see, they are not valued equally. And this brings us to the first really big reveal from the study. The researchers looked at who was actually putting their hand up for each type of task. So, since all of this was completely voluntary, did any patterns show up? Did men and women tend to choose different kinds of extra work? Oh boy, did they. The data was crystal clear. First, get this, women were 46% less likely than men to volunteer for those big, strategic, agentic projects. That is a massive gap. And then on the flip side, women were 34% more likely to take on the communal, culture-building tasks. So you can see this really stark divide in who was volunteering for what. So why does this happen? Well, the researchers point to something called gender role theory. It basically says that often without even realizing it, we tend to absorb societal stereotypes and choose behaviors that feel in character for our gender. Okay, but this is where the paradox really kicks in. So we know who did the tasks. The million-dollar question is, how did the company's evaluation committee, which, by the way, was intentionally set up to be gender balanced, how did they actually reward all this work? To understand what happened next, you have to know about a psychological theory called the shifting standards model. The idea is that we tend to judge people against the stereotypes we hold for their group. So when someone does something that defies a stereotype, like a man taking on nurturing communal work, we're often way more impressed simply because it exceeds our lower expectations. We're judging him against a different standard. All right, with that theory in mind, let's get to the big reveal. Who actually got the bigger pat on the back, the bigger bonus in their evaluation, for doing which kind of work? And here it is. This is the most jaw-dropping finding from the entire study. Just look at this table. For communal supportive work, the kind of work women were doing more of, men received a significant premium in their evaluations. And women, they got no significant premium at all. Now look at the agentic strategic work. Yeah, both groups got a bump, but the most outsized, disproportionate reward in the whole system went to men for doing the communal tasks stereotypically seen as women's work. So let's just let that sink in. The system ended up disproportionately rewarding men for doing the communal tasks that we typically associate with women, basically because it broke the stereotype and exceeded those low expectations. Okay, so what in the world does all this mean for you, for your job, for your workplace? Let's break down the real-world implications. First, and this is so important, this isn't about bad people or bad intentions. The company was trying to do a good thing. The evaluators were trying to be fair. The problem is unconscious bias, these hidden assumptions that can warp our judgment even when we are actively trying to be objective. The practical impact here is huge. The researchers point out that those agentic tasks, the ones women were less likely to volunteer for, are often the exact projects that get you noticed, the ones that lead to promotions. So by taking on more of the communal work, women might be accidentally getting steered onto a slower career path. It creates these invisible barriers. And hey, for any managers or leaders watching, this next part is absolutely critical. The company in the study did what we're all told to do. They created a 50-50 gender-balanced evaluation committee specifically to prevent bias. But it wasn't enough. The shifting standards were so baked in that they shaped the outcome anyway. Which brings us to the final powerful conclusion from the authors themselves. To actually fix these kinds of unintended problems, you can't just hope for the best. Organizations have to be incredibly intentional and deliberate about how they design these systems and define what success really looks like. And that really leaves us with a final question to take back to our own lives. Just think about your workplace for a second. Who's the person who always volunteers to plan the party, or mentor the new intern, or take notes in the big meeting? And maybe more importantly, how is that extra mile, that office housework, really truly valued? The answer might be a lot more complicated than you think.